Hello friends of the electrified charging fun and welcome to Electrified Speicher, your channel all around Skoda's e-mobility. My name is Matthias and today we talk about the topic of preheating of the battery of the ENYAQ, because you asked me a lot of questions about it. And whilst preheating has proven itself over and over again when it comes to charging, be it with the Elroq or with the ENYAQ, that you can charge easy and conveniently and fast under nearly every condition, the question arises around preheating for driving. Will it have a positive effect on driving? Will it have a better efficiency when driving when you preheat the battery manual for driving? I'll do the test in this video on the same test course I did a couple of days ago. You find the video here on the channel from last week under nearly the same conditions, yet preheated. And I bet you will be really surprised by the results. Again, it's -4 degrees Celsius outside here, and the battery now is at -1.5 degrees, not colder. Well, that is not so bad, simply because with my last test it was also at -1.5 degrees when I hit the road to see how efficient it is possible to drive in wintertime. The video is here on the channel. You may look at this. But the difference now is that we will start battery preheating to see if it has a positive effect on driving in winter conditions. Therefore, I will activate battery preconditioning right now. As you saw, I've started the battery preheating, yet you do not see any current on the heater element in that circuit. So I'm not sure whether here is some heating going on or not. For me, it seems no heating is working as I am not driving. Maybe the car is programmed like you need to drive to have that preheating in effect. And that brings me to the problem with this method. You cannot start, as of now, as much as I researched it, I didn't find any way to start preheating remote, battery preheating. I'm not talking about heating the car and defrost the car. Yes, you can start that in the app. And yes, under circumstances, it will slightly heat the battery. I made a video about that. I'm talking about the real battery preheating, bringing the battery over 20 degrees for a better charging experience. There is no way to start it other than sitting in the car and hit battery preheating, unless you have a charger in your route planning, I know. But for this, it might be only a technical showcase today and nothing real. Well, the trick definitely seems to be just driving a couple of meters as battery preheating is now running. I drove over there from where I stood outside, just 100 meters over here where I am now. And if you look at the car scanner data, you see there is a current on the heater element. So therefore, it is heating the fluid. It's already at 6 degrees. You see our test course we did so many times. We do this today to see how consumption will be. I've stopped battery preheating right now after around about half an hour, because it's not about getting the temperature to the highest possible value, but getting a good value for the invested energy. We are now at 18 degrees and we have still a temperature of the fluid of 30 degrees. This is really, really good. And therefore the consumption also went really high up. You see it here. Over 37 kilowatt hours, 100 kilometers, because preheating is 5 kilowatts and it's constantly draining the battery. First stop over Davos, and we've got some values here. In Davos still there is the World Economics Forum preparations, so a lot of traffic and a lot of problems. Therefore, average speed only 50 kilometers an hour. And the consumption is 37.4 kilowatt hours, 100 kilometers. This is 4 kilowatt hours, 100 kilometers more than without the preheating. The battery itself still got good values. You see it's at, now it dropped to 18.5, it is 19 degrees, while the fluid is only 9 degrees. Outside temperature is around -10 or -8. Next stop, Thusis, and now it looks much better. We are at 24 kilowatt hours, 100 kilometers. Average speed is nearly the same as with the other drive, where we were at about 22.5, 22.6. So still 1.5 kilowatt hours, 100 kilometer higher than the other drive. Battery temperature still quite good at 11.5 degrees. Yet you notice if you drive downhill or more flat and don't use much energy, you cannot keep the heat in the battery quite well. There's your result. I'm back from the test drive. 22.3 kilowatt hours, 100 kilometers. 57 kilometers an hour average. So pretty well comparable to my efficient drive. Now let's head to the conclusion. What has happened here? Did I something wrong? Are there things I could have done better? And maybe it's a scenario, whatever. Let's take a look at this and why I am personally thinking that preheating for driving has its use cases. Well, everything in the next chapter of this video. Now let's head over to the core of this video, and this is the preheating and its effect on consumption. Preheating was active from the start for 40 minutes, then I switched it off as you already saw before. It was 40 minutes at a maximum of 100%, so it was always between 4.9 and 5.1 kilowatts. Therefore, the maximum power was drawn from the battery. The heater is able to use 5 kilowatts. 40 minutes, this means 3.3 kilowatt hours spent for heating. And the effect was to heat the battery from -2 degrees up to 17.5 degrees Celsius, which is a delta of nearly 20 degrees in temperature. Also take into account that outside it was -4 to -8 degrees. So driving also cooled down the battery, which the heater has to compensate for. And if we now look at the consumption, well, without preheating we had 21.7 kilowatt hours 100 kilometers, whilst now with preheating we are at 22.3 kilowatt hours 100 kilometers. So consumption went up. This is not much. This could also be to external factors because of the traffic, of how am I driving. I try to do it nearly the same, but I'm a human, I'm not perfect. Also, the outside conditions were pretty much the same. On the preheated drive it was even less cold. We only go down to -16, not -21 as in the video before. But another very important and interesting thing has happened, and that has to do with the total capacity and the energy content of the battery, and that is something we talk about now. First off, consumption was 1 kilowatt hour higher 100 kilometers with the preheated ENYAQ than with the non-preheated one. This could be scenario based. My test drive has some specialities, and maybe my battery was at the optimal temperature at 17.5 degrees Celsius at the wrong time. It helped on the climb up to Davos. Afterwards, from Davos to Thusis, you have the decline. So you will only take a few or less energy from the battery. You will recuperate or regenerate a bit more. So it might be way more beneficial to have that 17.5 degrees when I was in Thusis, because afterwards I went on the highway with 100 and 120 kilometers an hour and would have benefited much more because I would have taken way more energy out of the battery there. Now let's take a deep dive into data, because there we find the explanation what has happened here and why preheating might be beneficial for driving even if you do not go to a fast charger. First off, you'll find on the left side the data from the preheated drive, whilst on the right side here of the screen you find the data from the non-preheated test drive. When I started the test drive, the energy content of the battery was nearly the same. The difference is 350 watt hours, so this is nearly to nothing, and temperature was basically the same, so therefore energy content at the same SoC should be the same. But at the end of the test drive, when you look at the data, you'll see that the preheated one has 2.6 kilowatt hours more energy content than the non-preheated one. But consumption was 1 kilowatt hours 100 kilometers higher. If you take the overall consumption, in this case you take the complete discharged energy, you will see that with the preheated version we've got 41.1 kilowatt hours discharged versus 38.6 kilowatt hours non-preheated. This is because of battery preheating. Now let's have a look at the regeneration and the total charge of my car, which can only come from regeneration because it was not plugged into a charger during the test drive. There we see with the preheated one we have regenerated exactly 5 kilowatt hours, whilst with the non-preheated we have regenerated 4.3 kilowatt hours. Well, the difference 700 watt hours, 0.7 kilowatt hours, this could also be through driving. Maybe this has nothing to do with preheated versus non-preheated. If we now look at the energy content, start of the drive, end of the drive, you will see that with the preheated one we have spent 31.75 kilowatt hours, whilst with the non-preheated one we spent 34.7 kilowatt hours. Again, head scratching. What has happened here? These numbers doesn't match. To solve this mystery, we have to dig in a few more data at the data points where I measured them. You see them here in that table. And you've got in red the preheated test drive, in blue the cold test drive, and in grayish the spread, so the difference between those two. And as we already talked about, after charge and before drive, they are nearly the same. You see an SOC of the BMS system, not the display. Therefore, you see 78.8 instead of the 80% which were displayed. This is a topic on its own. And if you look at the morning before the drive, they are close to each other. The difference is in favor for the cold battery with 350 watt hours more. But the important part is coming now. Have a look at Davos, the first stop. Whilst the SOC of the preheated test drive is lower, 50.8 or 51% versus 54%, 3% less, which is totally explainable due to the preheating. We took more energy from the battery, therefore the SOC is lower. You see something else. The energy content with the preheated version is 3.5 kilowatt hours higher despite the lower SOC. And this is due to temperature. The battery is 18 degrees Celsius warmer, and that not only makes up for the complete energy used for preheating, but also gives us more energy content. And this continues. Look at TUSIS. Again, we are still 2.5% lower SOC preheated, yet we've got a whopping 4 kilowatt hours more in the battery, and the temperature is still 13 degrees higher. And even at the end of the test drive, you see the difference of nearly 3% SOC remains, as we've spent that energy for heating, yet we still have 2.6 kilowatt hours more of energy content. And that explains the difference of getting 99 kilometers with the cold test drive remain and 121 kilometers with the preheated one. And if you now think, wow, that's cool, Speicher just found a perpetuum mobile, no, I have to disappoint you. Because you have to understand that this only works under certain conditions. Therefore, to heat the battery even more, you would have the need to invest more and more energy the higher the delta between the outside temperature and the battery gets. But you are limited to 5 kilowatts, so you can't even heat it up way longer. And you don't have to. Why? Because this curve, so more energy content, is not linear or even exponential. It gets flattened the higher the temperature gets, because the battery has an optimal temperature where it is operating, and this should be, according to the cell manufacturer LG Chem, around 25 degrees. So putting in more energy for higher temperatures will turn this effect into the opposite, and you will lose energy. So I'm sorry to disappoint you, there is no perpetuum mobile here. Now you might ask, but why is the SOC, the state of charge, still the same and didn't got adapted to the new energy content? Well, that is quite easy, because the state of charge is a relative value, whilst the energy content is an absolute one. And due to the rise of the temperature, energy content went up, and the total capacity of the battery also went up. Therefore, the SOC is still correct, because it's a percentage value on the total capacity, which is also higher. So if you now would recharge with such a warm battery, you could put in way more energy than you could put in a cold battery. And this is all due to the temperature delta. The battery is warmer and therefore the electrochemical processes are running much better in the battery. On the one side you have a lower inner resistance, therefore less losses to heat. Therefore you're more efficient when taking energy out of the battery, and even regeneration is a bit more efficient when putting back in energy. And also due to those improved temperature improved electrochemical processes, you have a higher energy content and a higher total capacity. Now you know that it could be really beneficial to preheat your battery even if you do not plan to go to a fast charger. Yet you have to meet certain preconditions. The first one is the distance you're driving. If you're on a short distance drive, the effect is not as high or even a negative effect than on a long distance trip. First ENYAQs ever built with software version 2, like I had before, had this. They had a programmed option that the battery, when it is below 8 degrees Celsius, will be heated to 12 degrees Celsius whenever you start driving. This led to horrifically high short distance consumption and a lot of complaints of customers. Therefore they quickly changed it, which again leads to a lot of complaints from customers on long distance drives. Talking about software version 3 on the first generation ENYAQ in a minute. Back to the topic, so the distance needs to be long enough to benefit from this effect. And second, the battery needs to be cold enough. Heating up a battery which is already at 15 or 20 degrees Celsius would not have the same effect as heating a battery at -5 degrees to 15 degrees Celsius when it comes to preheating for driving. And now we could do hundreds of test scenarios and try to find out what will be the best moment to activate it. Remember, my test drive was not the best, and which temperature you should reach. But to be honest, that's not the job of the driver. That's the job of a clever battery management system or whatever computer or unit in the car does this. This should be a mandatory feature of every EV, because increasing range on a long distance drive is the best thing you could do, at least for most people. Especially in winter times, where winter range is the nemesis of all EVs. And here you can increase your range simply by preheating the battery. But this is a job of the car, not of the driver. And the implementation could be quite easy, because it boils down to the question: do you want efficiency, so low consumption, or do you want more range? And this is not the question you should ask the driver. It's Again, you can boil it down to, are you going on a short distance or are you going on a long distance? Because most of us, when going short distance, want less consumption, going long distance, want more range. And if you want to do a first implementation of that, well, then integrate it into the route planner of the ENYAQ, because then every ENYAQ knows what is the route, where are we heading, how many altitude meters do we have, and stuff like this, and could then plan when to heat the battery and how much should the battery be heated. Of course, you can add options and configurations to the car so that everyone can set that to his or her delight, but this could be the first approach to make it simply clever. And therefore, we now should talk about software version 3, or better, the first generation ENYAQs. As you already heard, yes, they had something like preheating. Yes, the hardware is there. The car is capable of preheating the battery, yet it is not in the software. And now it would be easy to blame Skoda, because you bought a car, finally you bought it from Skoda. But as detailed as this video is, I want to differentiate this, because Skoda can't bring that function. They cannot put it into the car. This is the job of CARIAD, the software company of Volkswagen. And I am absolutely sure that Skoda is trying since years everything to make it happen that preheating comes to the first generation ENYAQs. Yet in Wolfsburg, Volkswagen and CARIAD seem to be deaf on their ears when it comes to this topic. And when they do not deliver this function, you won't get it. And yes, I know that they are complaining about so many control units and we need the supplier support and blah, blah, blah. But that is their problem. That is their bad architecture below the MEB platform. And you are, as a customer, not to blame name it, because they sold the car like this for you, and therefore I say Volkswagen CARIAD owes you this function, even though it's the fourth winter right now without that function. So yeah, I totally understand when you're disappointed and do not believe that this will ever come. But I think at least where Skoda has influence, there will be something which might be beneficial for you in the near future, so stay tuned. Now I want to ask you, what do you think about the results? Do you think they are correct, or did I something wrong? Because I'm an amateur when it comes to this topic and I can do mistakes. So let's discuss down in the comments what you think about the results of this video. Also, if you consider to test it or already tested preheating versus non-preheating, write your results down in the comments. If you like the video, please give it a thumbs up so that this English channel can grow even bigger, and even your little thumbs up helps to increase its reach. Also consider to subscribe if you're not subscribed to the channel already, so you do not miss out any new content like deep dives into technology, new Skoda EVs, or some tests like this here. And let's keep this English channel growing. It's still a rather small one compared to the German one, which is over 10 times bigger, I think, but maybe we can reach out to even more English-speaking people here. Also, a thanks to everyone who is supporting me in the current period of my channel, as I am running it full-time. Yes, the work I have to put into both channels, the German and the English one, is a full-time job, yet no full-time income is coming out of those channels for obvious reasons. They are still too small. But I cannot run another job 80 or 100% of my time and keep this channel on this level. I would have to sacrifice something, and namely this would be the first sacrifice I would make, would be the English videos. So thanks if you are using the Super Thanks or the PayPal to help me out whilst I'm implementing my business model all around this channel. And until this takes full effect, hopefully at the end of this year, I'm really thankful for every support from you. And I hope to see you in the next video, because maybe this video will also be beneficial for you. And until then, stay full of energy.